I'm pulled back there way too much. Speak of the devil. You let everybody in.
You give me power and I'm just going to use it, man.
I can see that. I was just going to shadow tonight. Didn't work out.
As I say, careful, Laura, he'll turn the whole thing over to you. It'll all be your problem.
Nah, no. You're going to be partly responsible, Mr. Mycon, if that happens.
I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody.
Yeah, you're like the peanut gallery, sitting there just like always delivering the peanut gallery comments. I know you.
I'm innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. Who's been signing on with my name?
You know how I could tell you weren't there on Sunday?
I was there Sunday.
Okay, last week? Did you miss last week, Wednesday?
He's been there.
So.
Okay, never mind.
I don't know.
Silent in the gallery. That's Mike.
Which brings me to a point, Donald. At the end of Tribe Talks, when you ask if anybody has alibis, what is it you're trying to ask?
Is there anything that anybody would like to say, bring to the conversation?
Is there a different definition of alibi that I'm not familiar with?
Some people, it's a military term, first of all. That's where I picked it up at, and can't let it
I think it's a legal term.
It could be a legal term, depending on your lifestyle, I guess. But in the military, we always say, are there any alibis? Anything that hasn't been covered that you would like to cover?
That is a strange definition. An alibi is typically an excuse for where you were when a crime was committed.
Well, to some extent, there are crimes being committed every day. I won't say that it happens here, but, some people consider what I do as a crime in and of itself. So.
Never.
Keep doing what you're doing, Laura, because I'm doing something else, trying to get Facebook up and running.
See, he's slowly handing it off. It's a trap. It's a trap.
How are you today, Nicole?
I'm doing okay. I think we're finally kind of caught up at work.
That's good. Maybe we'll have a season this year.
Yeah, I hope so.
I feel we are going to have a great season this year, regardless of what people say.
Yeah, we're just waiting to hear when it can actually start.
I washed my motorcycle today. It will start.
My season's been starting since January 1st. I don't know what y'all talking about.
Good on you.
Outside of a few snow weekends, I guess I should say, or snow weeks. But mostly good to go out here in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, so far this year, January was our busiest January ever by about 50%. February, we ran at capacity. March, it looks like we're probably going to hit capacity again. Could go on to April, don't know yet.
And so, Mark, that's not you all making up for lost students during the pandemic, because you never shut down, is that right?
Right, we operated all last year. We did cut classes to a maximum of 8 from, let's see, March, April, May, I think March through September, and then we started bumping things back up. But even at that, it was our busiest year ever. We had more classes. We probably had 1 to 2 classes per month over normal. just to handle the number of students.
That's just so encouraging. I was just having this conversation with my husband, wondering what the season is going to be like, and I hope that that is true for all of us.
If it's any indicator, our central region opened their registration last week on the 17th or 18th, and they're booked out till June.
Is that normal for you, Christopher?
Not that far out. Usually the first month or two, March and April, or March, April, and mid-May, but they are completely booked out until the end of June in our central region.
Mark, I just sent you something I was reading this week that I thought may be helpful as you peruse what you have in the work group. From the work group that you did all the work in the group with.
Just sent?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, so you should have got it as a message there. If not, I'll email it to you.
Okay, I didn't have that chat sidecar open yet, so I'll take a look.
Sorry, I missed the work group last week, Don. I had a double booking with the EC Council.
Christopher, you know, people say that to me all the time. I completely understand, never have to apologize. There are weeks where I'm like, how am I going to make this happen? Why am I really putting it out there like this? And when it gets too bad, people like Laura and Lynn and Rita step up. But there's never a need to apologize for not being able to be someplace, because we have things to do. It's life.
Well, it sounds like the SMSA conference out in Boise is going to be pretty good this year.
You're on the EC, right?
Yes.
Okay. Put up a couple things for SMSA. I was torn as to whether to put my money out there like that again.
Christopher, do you think you'll be allowed to travel by the time that comes around?
Hopefully. If not, I will probably travel I'll take a week of vacation and travel on my own, because it's being on the executive committee. We're supposed to have one in-person meeting a year.
Yeah, I kind of suspect we may not have permission to travel.
We're not sure yet, but we're going to find out.
So I'm not going to tell you who I got this from, but very recently I heard the topic, or the saying that I've heard several times: don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
You have to ask for permission in order to get it reimbursed.
Exactly. I was going to say,
Yeah.
it's a matter of permission or forgiveness. It'd be fine if there's money involved.
Right, pre-approval.
Yeah.
But when you're planning your own journey,
Yeah, I don't have to ask permission. If they say no, I can still just do it on my own.
it's an expensive construct, but you know, it's worth it. I keep telling myself. And my wife, she doesn't always agree.
Yeah, the only problem with the flight from here to Boise and back is about $1,100.
Always a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Isn't there some closer, bigger hub city that's drivable though? This happened to my husband a couple of years ago when he had to travel to Idaho.
The closest things around here, Central Illinois, we have a small regional airport here right in town. It only has 2 airlines that fly out of United and American, and they fly to hub cities. And then the next closest regional airport would be Bloomington, and they have like 4 airlines out of there. Otherwise, it's like 2.5 hours to St. Louis.
So it's not that it's on the other end, it's on your end that makes it expensive.
Right. Getting from here to the hub is the gotcha. Yeah, flying from Springfield to Chicago or to Dallas, that alone is about $350.
How much would it cost in gas for a motorcycle?
Not $350, but it would take a lot more time, obviously.
It
Get a
probably
faster
costs
motorcycle.
more.
What?
It probably costs more because you're paying hotels and gas.
I don't think it'd be $1,100 though.
No, but the journey would be worth it.
Yeah.
Just saying that, if I get pulled into this stuff,
I'm pretty sure still in Minnesota, there's this weird thing that says I can't ride my motorcycle to places and get reimbursed for it. It makes so much sense when I do motorcycle things,
Yep, that's how it is here. We can't ride ours unless we have pre-approval to take our own vehicle. If we have a motor pool vehicle available, we have to take that. Even though I could get in my car, drive where I wanted to go, and be back. If I go and have to go get the car, I've got to drive clear out to our office, pick up a car from the motor pool, go inside, get the keys, go out to the car, and adds like another hour on each side of it.
Yeah, but all of that justifies someone's job somewhere.
Yeah, it does. What's really interesting is the motor pool guys are working remotely, so there's nobody there to get the keys out for you. They just fill out the little paperwork that you get and send you a copy in email, and then you go in and have to get the security guard to go get the keys.
Again, justifying someone's job somewhere. Say, Don, you should be familiar with that in the military, right?
the construct is no greater than government cost, and typically you can get it authorized, especially if you know people, in the chain of command, to take a privately owned vehicle as long as it's not more than the government cost.
Would this be the same government that pays, $700 for hammers and $5,000 for toilet seats?
No, that would be the I'm a politician government, not the I'm a soldier government. But that's just my opinion for what it's worth.
All right, gang. So I have an actual rider coaching question for you all. It's more like a poll. It's not even a question. It's a poll. Can I do that?
No, I think it has to be a poll to be official.
Okay, then I'm going to make Don do it.
So, like I'm reading your mind? What?
All right. So on exercise 6, let's imagine that your riders are traveling clockwise. What is the correct range coaching position?
For which coach?
For the range coach.
At the end of the straightaway, when they're returning back to you, is where I like to go. I'd have to check my cards, which I happen to have.
Go to the Bible.
On the side of the range, not where the line is. So as they're coming out of the gate, they're going to pass by you in front of you. So their path of travel is between you and the line. So you can kind of watch the whole shebang.
Agree or disagree? Peanut gallery, etc.
That's kind of what I was saying, so I'll agree.
So
In general, I mean, there could be a reason to move, but
because you asked the question, what generated the positional question, knowing what the range cards say? For context.
Okay, so for context, let me just go out on a limb and say, I think that the coach position for the range coach is probably one of the most misunderstood or incorrectly applied situations on the range cards.
I'd agree with that. Since it took me a couple classes before somebody correct what I was doing.
I see that in more than one exercise when there are multiple positions on the cards because it doesn't have any sort of sequence listed. But the guideline I generally give my coaches is that if the students are riding away from you, you're not in a good spot.
Like if the students are riding behind you, is that what you mean by away, Mark?
No, it's like if, using your example, if you're at the line, then the students who you're observing are departing rather than coming towards you and able to stop them and talk to them, unless you hold up the line. But I see similar happening like on part 2 of exercise 5 on the perimeter. I'll see coaches standing at the wrong end of the range, encouraging the students to pick up their speed, when in fact they could do that from the other end of the range and also watch that they're correctly adjusting their speed downward.
I like how you said that the students should be riding towards you, not away from you. I think that's a good succinct way to fix or to answer all of that. I'm going to remember that. Thank you.
Say along the same lines, how about coaching positions for exercise 10? Or for, I think it's for part 2, you're supposed to be on the inside of the curve. I don't like that at all, personally.
I like to be just someplace where I'm hard to hit.
I just like to go in the theory that I never want anything going on behind me. And if you're on the inside of the curve, at some point in time, there's going to be at least one student behind you. And if something happens and you've got your back turned, I do not want to be in that situation. I'd rather still be on the outside and jump out of the way if something happens.
I think both are acceptable, are they not? You can choose.
That's my understanding.
I don't know. A lot of the interpretation of rider coach positions, I think, goes back to the former version of the BRC that I'm not familiar with, where I think it said BRC or coach 1 has to be here and coach 2 has to be there. I think a lot of that carried over without the denotations on the rider coach cards. Because I have a lot of older rider coaches tell me, no, that's where RC1 is supposed to be, or RC2, and I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, that's old stuff. RC1 and RC2 don't exist anymore.
Yeah, but a lot of coaches still use the terminology, and I can't figure it out.
So what are you doing to change the terminology?
Oh, I smack them upside the head with a MSF approved 2x4 when they're not looking.
That's from the Ron book of How to Coach? What?
Oh, no. He uses words.
Oh.
Ron's very good with words. I prefer 2x4s. It's more nonverbal.
Okay, but it needs to be a 6 to 8 foot 2x4.
Yeah, we got yelled at for that by a QA person.
Why use a 2x4? Why don't you use a 4x6?
Not all of us have the upper body strength for that.
Okay, check it.
So Mike, I have a question for you.
Sport seals.
If you are going by the philosophy that you never want to allow riders to get behind you, I'm curious if you're on the far side of the range for exercises 4 or 7, where you stand. Just to the inside of the path of travel or just to the outside?
4, they're coming towards you. So you're down in the corner. So there would never be anybody behind me in 4.
If you look at the cards and you're on the far side of the range away from staging, they're actually, the rider coach position is inside the path of travel. So they do actually come around behind you.
Oh, hell, I do that wrong also. What do you know?
Now that I was going to say, that's the one I see most often, rider coaches not standing in that position.
Yeah, I never noticed that. Yeah, I go on the outside.
Because that was a change from that exercise previously. right? Like we never had that inside the eyebrow on the far side of the range position before. Why is that there?
Why is it on the inside? Who can tell me?
Probably so you're looking at the braking,
Yep.
which is
That's exactly what I was
same
gonna
thing
say.
I've heard for exercise 10, but I can still see hand and foot from the outside, and I never have to have somebody go behind me. So I think it's safe, efficient, and effective. And if I get dinged for that on QA, so be it.
On each one of those on 4 and 7, if I am on that side of the range, I step to the back of the perimeter, and then as they approach that perimeter, I'll step towards the outside of the range to allow them to continue still in my line of view, not let them get behind me, and then come back to that way when I bring the next rider down. I don't like standing on the inside and having them come behind me either.
I stand on the inside, but after I coach them, I'll turn so my back is towards the brake chute, and I watch them come through the turn. It gives me a chance to sweep the whole range visually before I call the next rider. So they're behind. They're not even behind me. They're in my view, and it saves me a lot of flipping around in circles as well.
But how about on the other side of the range? What if there's somebody the other coach is working with, and they're in the perimeter turn while you're watching somebody come down the range? Now they're behind you. You've got somebody behind you.
Say that again.
If you're on the far side, on the inside, watching somebody come towards you, and on the other side of the range, there's a person going through the perimeter turn, they're behind you. That's the situation I never want to be in.
I'm still not visualizing that. If they're on the other side, of the range.
I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, if you're here,
Yeah,
watching somebody down here,
yeah.
and there's somebody on the other side of the range going through the perimeter turn, if you're over here, that person is behind you if you're looking down the range this way.
And that's for my partner over there to be managing.
You're responsible for the whole range. You know that. You're a QA person.
But you could see there. You're going to be calling the riders. You got to stand where you're coaching the riders that you're coaching, right?
That's why I like the outside, because from the outside I can use my peripheral vision. But yeah, I never noticed that. Thank you for pointing those out. I never noticed it 4 and 7.
I do move to the outside on occasion if I have a student that's having difficulty shifting, and I want to see what are they doing with their feet. Are they coming in sideways or digging in from behind and catching on their foot pegs, or something like that. But I go back to the default position.
And don't any of you tell Ron how negligent I am in all of this.
Yeah, and exercises like shifting and stopping, or stopping quickly, or stopping in a curve, or even what is exercise 13 when they're swerving. If the students are momentarily behind me, I don't really worry about it. If something goes wrong at that point, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. They're only behind me for a second or so, and if I'm in a position where I'm harder to hit, I probably significantly reduced the number of things that can go wrong anyway.
Yeah, to me, that's different than in 6, where if you're standing next to the line, they're coming at, down there at fairly high speed and making that corner and then getting back in line, all outside of your view, which that's terrifying to me.
Well, also, if you're standing next to the line in exercise 6, in part 1, if you need to coach a student for more than a second or two, the class is going to stop moving. But if you're stopping the riders out on the range, you can talk to them and answer questions, have a conversation, anything that does what they need, and it doesn't interrupt the class at all.
You get that similar problem in exercise 13, and with riders creeping up on the box, so that as they leave the swerve area, they're behind them as they go to the perimeter turn. And I see that a lot.
Yep, I agree. I always want me and other coaches to stand far enough back that they're making that turn from a stop in front of me.
It seems so easy to me. It just seems like common sense. I'm surprised that you got to say to people, "Hey, what's going on behind you over there?" And it's like a revelation.
But you've also done how many courses over
A bazillion.
period of how many years? And I really like this discussion because it gets to a point that I think we don't talk enough about, and that is how do you communicate with the other rider coach? And do you do it before each exercise? Do you do it before each class? Do you establish what each one of us is going to do before you walk out on the range or before you execute an exercise? Because that's when those things happen where it's like, why are you standing there? Or why weren't you looking in that direction if I'm covering this area? And so that rider coach to rider coach communication is a huge thing to alleviate some of these questions, I think. But I'll defer to Kelly since he's on now.
Or Jason.
Oh yeah, Jason, he knows.
Exercise 6 used to concern me a bit because of this was the first time that the students were doing something. They were initiating the turn without a coach having any kind of visual contact with them. They're actually going out on their own, going down the straightaway, and they're making all the decisions where to slow properly, and just to go through the sequence of turning. And it used to concern me more when I first started doing it, but not so much now. I used to have a opinion of having a coach at the far end of the range, somewhere near the cue cones, that they could assist if they needed it. But not so much now.
Several years ago, this pertains directly. I had the opportunity to participate in a workshop in a different state, and part of it involved riding, and it was riding exercises that aren't part of the BRC, but they're exercises that I was familiar with from earlier experience with MSF courses, and they were using the coaching positions indicated that I was familiar with from the older courses, including the ones that, like for exercise 6, would be down towards the far end of the range. And it very quickly taught me how incredibly useless that coaching position was. If the rider was looking where they should be looking, they could not see the signal from the coaches. And if they were paying attention to the coach, as a rider, I wasn't looking where I was supposed to be looking. And I came back with the realization that I needed to talk with some of my more experienced coaches here and say, have you ever been a rider with a coach out there? And we actually ran a workshop and we tried the position. And they went, oh yeah, that position I've been using because somebody told me it was a good way to do things is actually not a good thing at all.
You know that on exercise 6, when you have a full-size range and you've got the coach on the sideline and the coach out in the outfield, that sideline coaching position is near the slowdown area. So you can actually see a lot of good stuff and step over if there's a need to speed someone up or, encourage whatever. But also as they come back to the sideline, there's a lot of great coaching that you can give based on what you saw in their run while they were out there.
I think we all heard you. It's just everybody's taking back and thinking about it, Lynn. That must be what's going on.
It's a lot to process.
Is there Facebook drama this week?
I'm still trying to unravel Johari's window. What,
Or open it or something, right, Rick?
Don, what's next? Are we going to do the tensile strength of an isosceles triangle or something?
I think that might be what Mark has planned.
I can only imagine.
Well, I did take a really quick look at what Don sent, and it's similar to a lot of stuff that's is already there. You know, the considering what you're going to say and how it's said.
I don't know if everybody remembers Abe DeMarco, who stopped by a few weeks back. He actually texted me this week and offered up to everybody who wants to participate. And that's kind of why I talked a little bit about MBTI over Tribe Talk on Sunday. He offered to do a kind of a temperament or personality assessment for everybody, if you are interested, where we take and we get it in advance and we fill it out, and then he takes it and puts it into a group, and then we talk about it, which I thought, was interesting. It's not much different than Wired That Way. It gives us an opportunity to kind of look at somebody else's feedback about us. So if you're interested, I'll get a hold of him. But I would like to have a large enough group interested to make it worth his while and his time.
Yeah, playing with personalities is always fun.
It is, and I told him, that we kind of do that as a supporting thing for what we do as coaches, but most of us kind of get into it to kind of see how we fit, that we're self-reflective enough to want to have outside assessments. But once again, would not ask anybody to do it that doesn't feel comfortable doing so.
I think that would be awesome. Anybody that wants to do something for me or for us, because they're an awesome guy, sign me right up for that.
I don't know why he keeps doing these cool things for me. I have to tell you the story that it seems like my whole military career I followed him, and he would have a job and then I would take it over for him, and then I'd meet him in another foreign country and he was there doing a job and I'd take it over from him. It was just like one of those weird coincidences. But we've kept in contact over the years just because our paths seem to cross in the strangest of ways. And here we are again, him offering up to, do something for me, for us, out of the goodness of his heart. And I just thought it was rather nice of him.
Is he still in the military?
No, he actually, he was a PMS, Professor of Military Science, at one of the SUNY colleges here in New York. And now he runs a consulting business where he does teamwork development. Wow, really quiet tonight. You think Jason would have something to say? Maybe he's just listening in, stalking.
It's a self-reflective time, Don.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm in window, I don't know, between window 3 and 4, I don't know.
Yeah, he's in the bottom right quadrant.
Yeah, in a quadrant. I'd be interested. I find that stuff very interesting. And even though I'm not educated in any way along those lines, it's interesting stuff. And, you know, trying to create parallels to what we do with the students is, it's great. And I'm really, in a way, really disappointed we couldn't have more coaches participate on a regular basis. It's like pulling teeth trying to get people to come in. I do try, but not doing too well.
Count me in, Don, if you're doing that.
I guess I have to start writing a list, huh? So who is interested in participating? I got Laura, Nicole, Lynn, Rick, Mike,
Mark,
Mark.
Sounds interested.
All right. Sarah, gotcha. If you don't want to be public about it, just shoot me something. That's fine too. What did everybody think who attended? What did you think about, gotcha, Nicole, the tribe talk last Sunday? Got you too, Jeff. Was it too highbrow?
No, I think it was good. I think it was a little bit ill-timed for me because I had some serious web meeting fatigue going on after having spent 17 hours in web meetings that weekend. But
You know, kind of related to that, not me, but I was reading a tweet by a college age person who was saying that they spend 7 hours a day online doing classes, and sometimes the instructors then assign another couple of hours of online stuff to do. And she says, you know, it's too much online in that time frame. Your brain just, it's hard to stay on task, you know, in that format for such a long period. I felt bad for her.
I think we have yet to fully understand the impacts of being on things like this, where it has become such a large part of our lives. And although it's great to be able to see people that I normally don't get a view, there's something missing in just getting together with a group of people and having open, free-flowing conversations and not looking at a damn camera. And in one of the books that I was reading / listening to today, there was a discussion about endurance. What are you able to endure, and how long are you willing to endure something before you just say, all right, that's enough? And it's a good thing and a bad thing, and it's a personal decision. And of course, like Rita always says, everything relates back to the BRC. How much endurance do I have to continue to put forth effort in a certain direction? I hit a wall this week after doing 2 videos. I think the Tribe Talk and the Program Administrators Work Group this week, after doing 2 videos, knowing that I'm 2 weeks behind on Tribe Talk Happy Hour, I hit a wall and I was just like, I'm not doing another video today. I did one on Monday. I did one on Tuesday. Today it's supposed to be almost 50. By the way, it turned 52. Great day for New York when you got 6 feet of snow still piled up right on the edge of your driveway. And my endurance hit its limit and I had to do something else. My mind needed a break. I had to go out and wash in a salty motorcycle that's been sitting for a week, and I felt bad for treating my lady that way. So we all have levels of endurance of what we can do, what we're willing to put up with, how far we're willing to go. And it makes you wonder sometimes, all these kids, young adults, sitting behind a camera, sitting behind a computer screen, being self-responsible for taking the ability to look into a book, correlate things, talk to an instructor, like we talk here and we gain from each other. What's your endurance for that within a week? If kids are spending 30 or 40 hours a week behind a camera and a screen, can you imagine the stress and the fatigue that they receive from doing that? And we want to do more. We want to do everything that way. Everybody wants to do everything that way.
But maybe younger people will come to have such familiarity with that style of learning that they're going to find in-person learning to be all the things you're talking about, right? Like it's just a different perspective, maybe. Not that I think that it's not problematic, but it's just not what we're used to. So I think that we feel that more acutely than kids, maybe.
It's a possibility. I mean, it's certainly a different perspective to consider. And I'm trying to think, maybe it was the movie Judge Dredd. Does anybody remember that with Sylvester Stallone, where he's been incubated for a while and he gets out and he goes to the bathroom and he's looking for toilet paper and everybody just touches the stone?
No, it's the 3 seashells.
There you go.
You don't know how to use the 3 seashells.
See, maybe that's what's going on. And I'm just old and, feel like I'm in a weird movie sometimes.
My older son is a high school teacher, and if I were at home right now, I'd bring him in for this, but unfortunately, I'm not there. But his kids are ready to be done with using technology. In fact, he's had some of his kids, even I think it was last year, telling him that they could not believe that they wanted to have nothing to do with any sort of technology outside of school time. They didn't want to send text messages. They didn't want to Facebook with each other. They didn't want FaceTime meetings, stuff that they sort of thought that they lived for prior to being forced to be on the computer all day, every day. Or I think they were doing 4 days a week, but yeah, they're very, very ready to be done. And as many of them that are able to get back into the classroom are doing so.
Well, it seems like for years, parents have been trying to get their kids to go outside and play. It's like COVID's been this reset to get them to go towards more social interactions in person instead of all the online stuff. I could see kids that, we're here, we're self-motivated, we're here because we want to be here, but I could see there being difficulties with kids who, they're not the ones that they get their book open, and I think back to my own classroom experiences where, the teacher says, okay, open your books to page whatever, and 95% of the class does it, but there's that 5% that are slow on the uptake or can't find the page. And, you know, I could see them falling behind a little bit, you know, without someone looking over their shoulder to give the little poke to get them on task.
And my son's students are largely honors level students. So they are high achieving, generally pretty well motivated and capable. But they want to do anything but look at a screen.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're all reaching a burnout point, but I wish I could remember the particulars. There was a study I read that showed that people under a certain age actually processed and retained information better when they viewed it through a screen than on physical paper, whereas people older than that threshold processed and retained better reading from paper than they did on a screen. So I think there's definitely a difference in the way that kids are processing information today compared to when most of us were younger.
I think there's a flip side that's come up with some of this too. My twin girls are 12, and all of the COVID warnings and just the flood of information about staying safe has really driven up their anxiety. And so they have retreated more and are staying away more in their own space, and seeking out more online interaction versus in person as a way to mitigate the risk for themselves. They don't have much control in their life right now. And that's the one thing that they can be really active about, is keeping themselves safe and distant. Aside from a selected activity, that's kind of become the opposite for them. I mean, even hiking in state parks got to be concerning because they were just flooded for so long with all of these warnings, and trying to talk them off that ledge of anxiety it's not working for them anymore. So hopefully once the numbers start coming down, we can kind of integrate them back in a way that's a little more inclusive and healthy.
I wonder if there are changes happening on like kind of a cellular level, you know, where young people process information better on a screen. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Maybe there'll be studies done about the evolution of how the brain takes in information based on this stuff.
Lynn, I thought you were going to say, I wonder if there's changes happening in their brain because of the anxiety that Sarah's talking about with her kids. And I was going to say, yes, absolutely. According to that book from hell that Don made me read, there absolutely is. That being that book titled Behave by the Saplonsky guy. And he's a neurobiologist and talks about the effects of stress, and that really does structurally change your brain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still stuck on a lot of the things that Robert Sapolsky put out in that book. And one of the correlations, I think, with that and issues with people who have post-traumatic stress is the fact that our brain is always firing because of the anxiety of what could happen and what we have experienced in the past. And that completely affects everything that we do every day, how we react to other people, how we get along with other people. And unfortunately, people that have that problem have a tendency to seclude themselves so that they aren't put in those situations anymore. And that seclusion only generates more firing of the amygdala that causes that anxiety, so that any person then becomes the firer of those things that we think about that causes that anxiety and stress. So I think it's detrimental for us to be separated for a long time and to look for too much seclusion away from people. And I have to say, I do that quite a bit. I need to turn off from people around me and collect myself before I can re-engage again. So I think there's going to be a lot of fallout over the long period of time where we have been secluding ourselves from other people, including some of our loved ones, which is even worse than, you know, the social aspect of it. And so one of the things I struggle with that particular book that I'm thinking about and applying it to rider education quite a bit is how we try to make things automatic. We want to assist our students in gaining automaticity of function with motor skills. That what they do with the clutch, with brakes, with the throttle, with their body position is automatic, so that when a hazard or an obstacle is in their field of view, they know how to act to it. Unfortunately, the amygdala shuts off, bypasses executive function when we throw in automaticity. So how do we get them comfortable enough not to fire the amygdala, to go through the executive function, the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and actually think through and use judgment so as not to get into those situations in the first place, is extremely important in what we do. I know that got really deep, but do you understand where I'm going with this? How do we get them to not fire, to not be put in an anxiety or a fearful situation, so that they can use their judgment and not go to what they know from their reptile brain and just ride off the road?
It's exposure, just like what you said with the PTSD people. The more you try to avoid others, the worse it gets. That the same would be true of the circumstance that you're describing with riders. The more exposure they have, the less they get in that anxiety laden state. But how do you get there safely, I think, is really the question.
So kind of thinking through this and, you know, looking to the experts here, what do we provide in a novice level course that allows them to feel that comfort and not trigger the fear? Yeah, that's a question. Looking for an answer.
Well, you know, part of it's just our vibe going out there, you know. If we're relaxed and you know, not wound up and don't respond in a crazy way when crazy stuff happens, it helps them put their chill on and you know, be able to calm themselves down, I think. You know, have seen coaches that are very, you know, especially maybe new coaches that are so worried about their own performance that they haven't been able to transfer and, you know, put their concerns onto what the students are doing. And just, it's just a whole tension cycle that doesn't go anywhere good, you know. But if we can be kind of relaxed and of course, the more you've done this, the more you've seen crazy stuff that, you know, it doesn't make you nuts anymore. So it's easier to take a more low-key response and put a smile on people's faces.
So who else has a thought on that?
I try to avoid using the term heavy mayday. That tends to rile up the students a little bit, but no, along what Lynn's saying is they do feed off of us, and the way we present ourselves, professionally, organized, keeping emotions in check, even with the weather, not making a big deal that, you know, it's raining cats and dogs, but, you know, just not make it, give them things to overthink and bring their stress levels up. Try to maintain a level emotion state so that they can still learn.
what does a rider coach guide tell us about the environment that we provide to the students? Because everything reverts back to the BRC, right? And for the BRC, the rider coach guide is, the Bible or the main resource. What does it say about the environment that we
High
provide?
challenge, low threat.
Low threat, absolutely. I love that you use those 4 words. Because I wasn't thinking them at all, but I mean, that encapsulates everything, doesn't it?
I think part of low threat is letting students know that, hey, you're learning a new thing. You're going to make some mistakes. I expect you to make mistakes because I think a lot of times students are their own worst enemy. They're in our eyes doing just fine, but in their eyes, they're doing terrible because they've put such a high standard on what they expect out of themselves, an unrealistic standard for learning a new thing. So I think it's good to let them know, hey, you know what? You're going to make a few mistakes. We'll keep the mistakes to make them little mistakes, not big mistakes, and we're good. Mistakes happen.
Any other thoughts? Because I had an acronym in my mind. It wasn't 4 words, it was 3. And I know Mike knows it, and Rick knows it, and Chris knows it, and John knows it, and Kelly knows it.
Trying to think of which acronym you have in mind at the moment.
Come on, read it. Get it. 3 letters. Everybody uses it.
I'm sure you'd make Dr. Ray real happy if you're thinking about Sam, but I don't think that's it.
No, it's not Sam, although that was the other one. Ron knows the 3-letter acronym that I'm thinking about that isn't Sam. Sam would be too easy, considering VRETs this week. Come on, please, somebody help me.
Is this something really easy and we're all going to go like, when you tell us?
I just got here. What are we talking about, Don?
3-letter acronym from, Rider Coach Guide, Rider Handbook that we use all the time that has to do with a good environment.
Safe, effective, efficient.
SCORE by Lynn.
Yeah.
So, safe, effective, efficient. Everybody thinks about efficient, right? I think that was a discussion this week on the VRETs. But safe, certainly, and effective, that would mean not having students be fearful. Lots of studies on the classroom stuff, but, it's the same on the range. Do people feel comfortable there? I just looked at chat. Jeff Schultz has been all over it. He's like twice, hey, it's this. I like the fact that Lynn talked about student talking about failure. That was an MSF Rider Coach Facebook thing this week that I saw. The acronym FAIL. Does anybody know what that acronym is? John's shaking it.
I was just trying to remember it. First attempt in learning?
Yep. That gets back to the endurance thing. You got to be willing to fail. Sometimes multiple times. Y'all are quiet tonight. I'm going to just shut up and let Laura take over.
I definitely don't want to take over. I was going to say, because, you know, there can't be a tribe talk without me bringing up Brene Brown. One of her things in the book Rising Strong is her talking about how we as a culture don't talk about failing and failure enough. We want to fail and then just move on and pretend it never happened or whatever, and that isn't necessarily serving us, as well as having a conversation about failing and everything that goes along with that, because obviously there's things to learn from that.
Brene also had one that I refer to occasionally. If you're comfortable, you're not learning.
Now we're in trouble.
We've invoked Brene Brown twice.
That's not what she was referring to. I won't have to say another word. So I was watching a Netflix thing this afternoon after I washed my bike, you know, as I was like trying to chill out a little bit before doing some supper stuff. But it was the documentary about Queen with Adam Lambert. And Adam Lambert was talking about how at the time of being, or the time before he got to American Idol, he still feared life and what people would think about who he is. And then by the time he got to American Idol, those fears were kind of set aside because he had failed enough, but also succeeded enough that he realized that, you know, to succeed, you have to put yourself out there. So the Brene Brown vulnerability thing, you know, shows up. And then by the time he did not win, he failed winning American Idol. He came in second. But his success was he was there with his idols on stage. The drummer and the guitar player for Queen were there and helping him to win second place on American Idol. And even after that, it took well over a year for them to come back to him and say, hey, do you want to go on tour with us and kind of revive the things we were doing? So, you know, failure is a huge part of success. And so having that endurance and being able to get beyond those intermediate failures is something that we could all aspire to be taking to heart. Please, somebody else take over. Herheim's here. He's always got something ready listening to.
Okay, I'll jump in. Has everybody seen the new Harley Pan American yet? Have you talked about that yet, or did I miss it?
Nope.
You weren't sleeping, Ron.
I haven't slept in days. The
Well,
puppy,
we know what to expect now.
I'm telling you, this puppy is just, my whole existence is play with the puppy, take the puppy out, bring the puppy in, play with the puppy, take the puppy out, bring the puppy. That's my entire cycle of life now.
Are you going to talk to us about the Panamera? Pan America? Is that what it's called? Not Panamera, that's a Porsche.
No, you pronounced it wrong. It's called the Dirt Glide.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait till I can use that in real life.
I did read that it only weighs 100 pounds more than my Buell, Ulysses.
I think it's going to be a neat bike. at a price point that surprised me. I thought they'd be well into the 24 range.
I don't think the prices posted with the bikes include bags, etc.
Or
And I wouldn't
tires
have
or
posted those
chains,
prices either.
or all of the mods you have to have before you take it out of the dealership.
Yeah,
You know,
you'll
like
spend another grand for the baggage and anything else that you want to put on it. Easy. I already looked at some of those prices.
And the mods to make it a better, more powerful bike. It's not.
You mean the 130, a 131 kit?
Bashing. That's just into the truth. Listen, if things don't get going, I'm going to have to go take a nap. Or go play with the puppy. At least she'll keep me awake.
Just bring the puppy to the meeting. Then you can do both.
I can do that. I can do that. But then you'd have to go video, Sarah.
I have it on. I just have to dial in from multiple devices because my laptop is not entirely functional right now, and I'm waiting for my new camera and headset.
Okay, got it.
So I want somebody to say why the Dirt Glide is going to be awesome.
Because Jason was paid to say that.
No, in fact, I've made such a stink about Dirt Glide that corporate honestly hates it when I say that, and they're not bashful about telling anybody that I am wrong. But if I keep saying it long enough, it will be known as the Dirt Glide forever. And I think it would be a better selling point, in my opinion, because it's hilarious. And the specs for the bike it's a good thing. I'm disappointed that they potentially dropped the Bronx and all that other kind of stuff. But that's me looking at something that may not officially be 100% made in Wisconsin, but it's growing our economy. Yes, they're source parts from everywhere else. The one thing that I'm concerned of in a semi-adventure bike is I think they skimped out on not having a big enough front tire, and I suspect their suspension is going to go the way of the Ulysses, which is not really enough to call it an adventure bike. But it's adventure light, and that's the kind of people that they're going to attract anyways, because as I'm told about the folks with really big Jeeps, where's Bumpus? Is he in here? Because I keep seeing his Facebook posts. That people call those things pavement princesses. And that is the extent of your average adventure bike owner anyways. It might go in the gravel because there's gravel going to your driveway. So what the hell? The part that I'm very interested in hearing, though, is the engine. As somebody that I trust dearly laughed and said, it's going to sound just like a Ducati. To which the response was, no, this will sound like a Harley. And that person giggled and said, no, really, I think so. But I know that there are other parts available for it. And yeah, you can do all that stuff. But 150 horsepower out of something that says Harley on it that came from the factory? That sounds like fun. What the hell? And I know some people are poo-pooing a torque number, but I've never had a problem with leader bikes before, and that seems to be about on par for 2001 to 2005 Japanese leader bike power. So what the hell? I expect fun things. It'll do wheelies. That's something most Harleys don't do on purpose.
Well, it's only a 60-degree V, so it should sound like an Aprilia. Yeah, I work in a Harley Davidson dealership, so I've been asked by a bunch of people, are you going to get one? Are you going to get one? And I try not to disappoint them too much. But I was talking with the GM a couple of days ago as he was having salespeople ride around on a BMW GS and on a Multistrada that we took in trade, and pointed out that they really look at the adventure bike market, that the liter plus adventure bikes are not the big sellers anymore, that's years ago. And that if you actually want to go someplace on the bike, what's selling now are the 7 to 850 cc bikes. Those are what are going. And
Yeah,
what you said,
but-
said, oh, maybe it's price point. And I said, no, that adventure bike riders spend a lot of stuff on the stuff for their bikes, but it's that the bikes that are lighter are going to be more maneuverable and more easily handled when there's no pavement.
You would think that, but then like the Tiger 700 and the Tiger 800, those turned out to be really, really good, but they had a very KLR-ish front wheel. Whereas what I'm told is the GS 800, or I don't know, GS 850, that the GS 850 is harder to ride in an off-road environment than the GS Elephant 1250. That because of all the weight and low center of gravity, or the low center of mass, it actually helps. And yeah, and you were talking about a 60-degree twin sounding like an Aprilia, but then don't most Harleys have a particularly strange tuning and a flywheel? I got to be careful what I say because Ted Jenkins is in here, but you know, who I admire, you know, greatly. But I seem to remember that I was on like a Buell Blast or something, like half of a Sportster, and it just seemed like every time I was rolling off the throttle, the whole thing was just like the engine just wouldn't stop rolling. It would just keep cold sparking. I wasn't used to that sensation. So does the Pan America do that?
Well, no one has seen one yet, so we don't know. But you know, the Harley Davidson's, you know, the traditional Harley engine is a 45-degree V, so they do have a really super oddball firing order.
Yeah.
Or firing intervals are super odd.
Yeah.
But Robin, it
So
sounds
this-
like what you're describing is more like just really a lot of engine braking that you get from a big V-twin. That's the GS, the 1200 motor, to me does not have that in the same way that other big V-twins do.
That's what it is. But that doesn't have a flywheel, like a weighted flywheel to make sure that the spark timing keeps going or whatever.
Well, on the Blast, it had a fairly, for a 500 cc bike, it had a pretty heavy flywheel just to try to make the engine run a little more smoothly, and to make it more beginner friendly, in that it's harder to stall when there's a lot of inertia.
I get it. Learning. Thank you. Actually, both of you. Yeah, I was thinking if it's a 60. What is the what's the V-Strom? Is that a 75 or 60-degree twin?
No, they're 90s.
It's a 90-degree twin. It's like
yeah,
riding a helicopter.
It's, well, that's why the SV650 and SV1000 sounded like Ducatis.
I just rode a Multistrada, a friend of mine's Multistrada, that is completely kitted out with all kinds of crazy tech nonsense that, I don't know, it just seemed like all it wanted to do was wheelie everywhere. And it did.
And that's bad. Why?
No comment.
It sounds to me like Robin wants a Ducati.
No. Well, you know, the thing is, at least if it's a Ducati, the parts will be easy to get. It'll be fairly easy to fix if anything is wrong, right? Affordable, too. The parts will be easily accessible, affordable, and it'll be easy to fix.
Hey, Ducati does some things right. They build bikes where you basically need one fastener or one wrench because they have the same size fasteners on all the major components. So they're really not that hard to work on. It's just intimidating because it's Italian and yes, it costs a lot. Just be a good mechanic and it's not a big deal.
So here's a factoid that I shared with Dr. Green a couple weeks ago and he totally blew me off. Ducati only actually manufactures 2 parts for any of their bikes. You want to guess what they are?
The frame and the engine. The hand grips?
I mean 2 parts, not composite items.
Seriously? I don't know.
The reason that they use one fastener for so many things is because then they only have to source that one fastener and they can get them all from the same place. They make camshafts and crankshafts. That's the only things they make.
Huh. Well, just to keep the record straight there, Herheim, I wasn't dogging Ducati. I wasn't Ducati. Ha ha ha. Somebody,
Hey man,
somebody
it's
some
okay.
random brand.
I can't afford that stuff either. I wait for people to bring their bikes to my shop so I can show them how to use tools.
I resemble that remark.
And because she wholly believes that only 2 parts isn't enough, she's going to give her fleet to me.
In my will, maybe. If you're nice, if you keep being nice to me.
I blew that, didn't I?
That Street Fighter is going to leave my possession over my dead body. In fact, I always feel like I need to buy a backup. That's how much I love that bike.
I think Rick mentioned something earlier that's kind of sitting in my brain. You were talking about weather. And I think that has a lot to do with environment. And some of the posts I've seen within the last 2 weeks has got me wondering, and I posted on the forum and nobody's been out there to read it, or at least they haven't commented on it. What environment, weather-wise, are you willing to go out on a limb with students for, and how does it affect student learning?
I find problems with the weather are not usually this weather or that weather, but this weather and that weather. So you can get away with it being quite cold, but if it's cold and wet, not so much. And you can get away with it being quite wet, but if it's wet and windy, not so much. And similar combinations of those things. So, you know, we don't ride when it's stupidly cold, you know, like 33, you know, and we try to keep it in the 40 and above range, although 30s could happen, I suppose, at the shoulder seasons. But, you know, when you start adding in those other components, it becomes, you're chasing good for bad, you know, the results are not good. You know, sometimes we just have to call it. Occasionally, I'll cancel a class preemptively because I know it's just going to be crap out, you know, when we have the ends of the hurricanes blowing through or whatever, and it's just going to be pissing down cats and dogs, you know, for the whole weekend. You know, sometimes I'll just say, you know what, this isn't even worth pursuing. It's not going to be a good experience. We're better off just putting it off. So I do make the call sometimes. And, you know, no one likes it in the moment, but afterwards they thank me.
Yeah, for me, in large part, it depends what the students are prepared for. You know, is it a weather condition that's something that's typical for where we are, or is it some drastic change from usual? And are the students prepared to deal with whatever we've got?
I saw a student start to get hypothermia in warm weather, rain, because that can actually happen. You know, when they get off the bike and they're shaking. They don't want to go home, but they're shaking. And I've had to say, like, you can't be here anymore. You have to go. Sorry, man. You know, in that particular case, I'm gonna be a dude. Sorry, Kelly Howard. Do you have power? Yeah. Hey.
We finally have power. 54 hours without power.
Dude. How's your bill? Did you get one of these crazy bills?
No, we have an annual or a monthly commitment. You know, they average it out.
Okay. All right. I'm glad to know it, man. Glad you're all right down there.
Well, with the environment, we can't compromise on safety. That's paramount, and we sometimes need to think for our students. They may want to continue, but hopefully we have the wisdom to know when to stop.
I was doing a prep once and it was on Long Island, and it was early in the season. I'll say it was March. And you know, the weather had been okay, but then the temperature dropped. It was in the 40s, and then it started to rain. And I said to the candidates, okay, we're going to stop now for today and go inside. And they're like, oh, no, we want to keep riding. And I'm like, yeah, no, you really don't. And they said, no, we could do one more. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, we set up for the next exercise, and they're like minutes into it, and they're turning blue and their teeth are chattering. And so I stopped it and gathered them around. And I was like, well, what did you learn from this? And they were like, it's too cold to ride. I said, yes, that's right. You know, and so we, you know, they got a little taste of, you know, when too much is too much, and time to call it a day.
I guess I grew up in a different environment, and the program where I learned to be a rider coach had specific cutoffs. So if it was below 40 degrees or 40 degrees and below, our guidance was to cancel a class. And rain was a judgment call based on the rider coach, but it was highly recommended or highly questionable if it was going to rain the whole time that you would have students out there for that whole time period. And so, you know, that's a perspective, and I know it's not the only perspective, but I often wonder the effects of somebody being soaked to the bone if they're not prepared, and how that affects the learning. Or if they're at 45 degrees, say, you know, today was 50. Seemed wonderful when I was able to take off the jacket and stuff compared to the last couple weeks. But I could imagine if I was out there trying to learn, and, you know, after several exercises, how I would have felt sitting on a motorcycle, not pitching cones, not running around trying to make sure everything's done, but after sitting on a motorcycle and trying some stuff, and then jumping off and standing and talking with people, and then doing that, you know, for an hour and a half, how would I still be focused on that, or would I be more concerned of, you know, I thought it was warm out, but I'm starting to get a little bit chilly here. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You have to keep tabs on people, you know, check in with them. How are you doing? And sometimes if I know in advance that the weather's going to be challenging, I'll send out an extra notice to the class. Hey, it looks like the forecast is crap for this weekend. You really need to consider bringing X, Y, and Z so that we're able to do this. And sometimes on day one, you know, we'll only push so far, you know, and we'll hit the wall. But, you know, that little bit of experience in the bad weather helps prepare the students. We can say, okay, you saw what it was like out here today. We're supposed to have more of the same tomorrow. So between now and then, you really need to make sure that you find yourself a rain suit and an extra pair of gloves, or, you know, whatever it's going to take for them to be comfortable, you know, in that setup. And occasionally it's just too crappy, and we have to say, listen, you know what, we have to stop. We're not done, but we have to stop, and we'll have to, you know, reschedule and come back to finish up, which fortunately doesn't happen too often, because usually in the course of, you know, a 2 or 3 day course, we're able to find enough hours that aren't crappy to get it done. But sometimes you just have to say when, you know, rescheduling is a bear. It's terrible, but it's better than, you know, I kind of think of it as if someone has a mishap, I'm going to find myself in court trying to explain why we were riding in those conditions. And, you know, maybe we shouldn't have been riding in those conditions. So you kind of have to have that in the back of your head as well. Sometimes you just have to call it.
If the pavement is unsafe to operate a motorcycle, there is no doubt in my mind that that class should be canceled. If the temperature is such that the student can't be safe on the motorcycle, that's on the student. You need to take your own and be self-aware and understand what's going on. And as providers, of course, we have to tell somebody up front because sometimes they don't know. But when I invite students to take classes, like all the ones that signed up for the very first class, we need a class, I want to be in the first class. I'm like, are you sure? Because that's Easter weekend and it's going to be cold. And I had somebody ask me like, well, you know, what's the weather going to be? I'm like, if I could actually tell you what the weather was going to be, I would be in a different career field and I would be making millions of dollars. But I do this. Luckily, majority of my work is 3-wheel class. And because it's for Can-Am, I don't even start those classes till the end of April. But I've been beat up multiple times running the college program where it hit 70 in second week in March, that one day. And people are screaming at me about, why don't you have a class the middle of March? And I'm like, because odds are it's going to freeze on Sunday morning and then we're going to have to postpone class for 2 hours while it thaws out so we can ride safely. And when I work at the college, which right now, our college is still unsure whether or not we're going to have a program for this year. When I work at the college, we have, and this was my question, I guess, Don, when you started talking, I had a question. The site that you began on, was it a private site or a state-funded site? And did they have a range that was only a range, meaning a full-time range that only did that function, or was it a shared parking lot or somewhere they rented?
Yes. I was actually on a military site, which was a contractor for the military, but I also was tied into the state program because they loaned me through an agreement the motorcycles, and they also benefited from the numbers I ran through in their state numbers, which of course helped with their funding. And so there was a mutual agreement as to much of what we did, and I balanced the towel again between the state program, being a contractor, and serving the military and government. So it was a great way to learn how to balance all those things. But the state program was the one that kind of had those guidelines. And because I was so aware, I guess is the best word, of how everything impacted everything else, you know, using motorcycles, being under a contract, providing a service. I knew what happened if I didn't provide the service. I always just broke it down to my basic rider coach judgment as far as whether to call a class or not.
We have,
go ahead, Nicole.
We have 3 absolutes, which is no class during tornado warnings, no class during lightning, and no class when there's accumulated snow or ice on the ground. Anything else is rider coach judgment call. And it will inevitably happen that we get a phone call at some point in the season from someone at a site saying, this is the weather, should I cancel this class? And asking us as administrators is, we're trying to break them of that because our region is so large that where we are and where the site is can be 80 miles apart or more, and weather completely different from where we are to where they are. So we've been encouraging them to use technology and use all the weather apps that are available to kind of try to predict things and plan things. I'm curious to see if we have more weather cancellations this year because we don't have as much building access with COVID precautions as we used to. And so saying, let's stop for a couple hours and go inside at certain points is not going to be an option anymore.
I kind of tying into that, I give my coaches full autonomy on if they feel they need to stop a class because of conditions. And, you know, so I sometimes will have them, and it doesn't happen very often, you know, maybe once or twice a year, we might cancel a class or not finish a class. And, you know, my coaches will call me up and they'll be all apologetic about it. Oh, I'm so sorry I canceled. I said, you would have canceled 20 minutes ago, but I really felt, I said, and I tell them, listen, if you feel you needed to cancel a class, cancel a class. You know, I rely on you to make that call. And I'd much rather have everybody be inconvenienced than have everybody be not safe. You know, it really does. That's the big picture, right? And so even though I give them the autonomy, they're sometimes reluctant to use it, I think, but I totally will not be mad at them for canceling a class.
My biggest problem right now is I'm looking at my first and only 6 weekends that I have before July, actually before June. If one of them cancels, I only have 5 more classes to stick these people in to guarantee it's okay. And I realized it cost me about 20% to give them a refund. That scares the hell out of me. But I'll be, you know, it'll work and we'll still break even by the end of the year, so it won't matter. But that's kind of scary from a financial standpoint. I'm sure a lot of schools worry about things like that. But when I have the college at, you know, to control that, it's one space. We don't even let people park on this space. It's just ours. We throw it in another weekend and we're going to run classes until November, no matter what. Well, unless there's snow or lightning or a tornado warning, like Nicole said. So no problem. We'll just keep moving it back until it works for your schedule. Right now, I don't own my own space to do that in, and I'm just a little bit scared. But we're going to try and help out customers to the best of our ability.
Years ago, we had a site out at Floyd Bennett Field, and our bikes were stored in a little side room on an airplane hangar that was otherwise condemned. And this guy who was a regular out there, he had a motorhome and he'd come out and go fishing in Jamaica Bay. He comes over to us one day, he kind of comes out on the range in his motorhome. So I said, oh, something's up. He wouldn't do that. He knows better than that, you know. And he comes over and he says, there's a tornado warning right over there. And my boss looks at me and I look at him and we look at the hangar and it's like, are we safer in the condemned hangar or are we safer out here? And luckily it never quite materialized, but we had this question of indoors or outdoors. Either way, it doesn't look very good. Heat is another reason that we've canceled classes, you know, or even not started classes because we knew there was going to be an extreme high heat index, which, you know, was outside the normal parameters. We said, you know what, the likelihood of this class finishing is so low that it's just not worth even starting. So, and those combinations of factors come up and bite you.
We'd lose most of our classes in the summer if we did that in Houston.
I think that gets back to what maybe Mark was saying about, you know, what do students expect is normal for that area. So, you know, Houston, hot weather, you know, Arizona, hot weather, New York, 6 feet of snow.
Well, they're never prepared. We have to watch out for them and make sure they have water. You know, the ones that come out in the black leather jackets know, you know, here, get a long sleeve shirt, take care of them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no matter how you how accustomed you are to the typical weather, it's not the same on the range oftentimes. So having extreme heat may be something you're used to a certain degree in an area, but then amplifying that by being out on a paved surface all day is a whole nother thing.
Well, you know, and I think that also carries over to our students. What are they used to? You know, a lot of our students, they're at home, they have office jobs. They're not used to being outdoors for a whole day, and they really have no clue about how that's going to affect them, even when the weather is not extreme, you know, in our view, one way or the other. They're just not used to it. And sometimes it really kicks their butt and they have a hard time getting through the day. And, you know, I make a point of calling our senior students and I tell them, you know, it's not usually that our senior students can't ride the motorcycle, but sometimes they have trouble getting through the day. Here's what your day is going to look like. You know, I want you to come prepared so you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
You mean you want me to walk all the way over there to listen to you talk?
Yeah, exactly. Or that you're going to have to walk from there to there to get to the restroom, you know. They might not be up to the task.
I just want to say those are all excellent points. Taking into consideration the students' conditioning, their normal everyday experience, the norms for your area, the fact that they'll be on pavement, the fact that they could get sunburn, windburned, heat stroke, or even chills on the same day, all on the same day. If you're in like where we are, Lynn, you can have a chilly morning and a hot midday and dehydration all around, which they don't consider even when it's cold. So they're just, it's just an unusual experience. It's outside of the norm for most people.
I'm always offering people sunscreen and they won't take me up on it. And then the next day they come in and they're, you know, they're cherry red and uncomfortable. And it's like, you know, I feel bad, but I can lead them to water, but I can't make them drink, you know?
That's right. And sometimes you'll notice that, let's say on a day 2, they'll come in. I mean, aside from the fact that there's maybe less nerves because they're familiar with the experience, they'll come in more well rested because they were so taxed physically and mentally the day before. But maybe the night before they didn't take it as seriously, or they're up till 3 in the morning doing an e-course or something. And they come in the second day and they're like, yeah, they canceled their plans and they actually got some sleep. So sometimes they don't fully grasp like the full scope of how involved and how present they need to be until they've been through it for a day and it's taxed them a bit. But those are all great things to consider. The fact that they're not, I really like that point that this may be beyond their daily experience and their work environment. I mean, how many people are really outside standing on pavement for, I don't know, 5 to 7 hours a day or something like that in the elements?
Not that many. And then when you add to that physical taxation, the fact that their brains are being taxed as well, you know, it really can be exhausting, you know, in short order. You know, right. Their body's working extra to deal with whatever the weather's doing, as well as their brains working overtime.
Of course.
You know, before you know it, they're ready for a nap.
There's so much information coming in, and I acknowledge that, and you always get those nods of acknowledgement, like your brains and your bodies are tired. You guys look well rested on the second day. You can see it by how they come in and how they carry themselves. They're more relaxed, and they've gotten some rest, hopefully. Yeah. So thanks for saying that. Everybody that spoke just now, those are all great points.
Peter, is this your first night here? I can't. I'm slow. I may have forgotten seeing you before.
No, thanks for having me. I only made it to one other session in December. I was in Bolivia. I know I might have spoken once or twice. It must have been right around New Year's. And you guys had me on. Lynn was on. Obviously, you were on. Yeah, it was great. It's just been conflicting with my work schedule, but I'm glad I could make it. So thanks for having me.
Where in New York are you, if you don't
I'm
mind?
downstate. on Long Island with, on the road again, Steve Bertolini, if you know him. I know Lynn knows.
Okay.
So that's where we are, Nassau
You
County.
get, Peter, excuse me, Peter, you have our sympathies.
I'll let Steve know. Thank you.
Yeah, please do that. Please do that.
I will. Thank you. Thank you.
Peter, I think it's funny that you mentioned being up till 3 a.m. finishing an e-course, because we looked at some data last year, although we had a short season. What the data said was that for an 8 a.m. start time for class, 10% of students finished between midnight and 7:15 a.m. that morning. I'm curious, does anybody else have stats on that sort of thing?
I'm glad you're able to get stats. That's very smart. That I figured somebody would have access to that data. I mean, I can just tell from their reaction, and that's the ones that are willing to admit, because you can joke about it, and the ones that laugh involuntarily, like, yeah, like I got your number. You can see it coming in. I found that I've suggested to just make the deadline. For example, I know everybody runs it differently, but let's say we do a typical weekend course, and then the classroom used to be, let's say, a Thursday, and then make sure you show up. If you don't have that e-course submitted, sometimes they'll tell them, just make sure you have it by Saturday morning or whenever they're supposed to be on the range. And then they might show up on that first day, and then the admin says, okay, make sure you have it by tomorrow. So either Friday night or Saturday night, they're up late doing the e-course. And I feel like if we gave them a more firm deadline that was 2 days before, because people, knowing that people and anticipating that people will push it to the last minute, let's not have the last minute be the night before the range. So I know you have some last minute signups, but I think that would help if we could somehow, give a cutoff that was not the night before range activities, at least, so you don't have that. There's always going to be people that push it. That's my thinking, right? That there are last minute people, and for whatever reason.
So I think the issue is
number. That's a lot.
What's that, Lynn?
I'm surprised by that 10% number, though, is finishing it in the wee hours the night before. That's a lot. If I get students that come on the day of and their e-course isn't done, I tell them, listen, if you get it done tonight, that's fine. But if you don't get it done, it's no problem. We just hold your card until you get it done. That it's not like it all has to happen, before the end of day Sunday. We got time.
That's nice.
I'm actually surprised that it's only 10%. A lot of mine seem to be a lot later than that. But I think the issue is a lot of people, it says 3 hours. They say, I can get through that in an hour and a half. What they don't realize is, no, you can't. So once you've committed to doing it at midnight the night before, you're stuck.
Right. That's exactly the problem with the e-course and you letting them know that they needed to get it done. They will try to undercut. I have students coming the next morning before the range stating, well, we just thought it's going to be, an hour and a half, just to fly through. I'm a quick learner, but it's set where it's a minimum of 3 hours. And they just don't understand it. Why do I have to look through all of that? Because you have to understand the approach to, say, for writing is what I always try to get across. So that alone becomes them staying up until midnight. Yeah, I started at 10 o'clock. I thought I'd be done by 11:30. Yeah, I didn't get done until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever time that they got. It's like, and you're here now? Well, yeah, this is the only weekend I have available. I won't be able to do it for the rest of it. So you get almost every type of excuse. But the general consensus is that I usually have one student. I cannot think of a time where I did not have one student out of a class of 12 that stayed up past midnight to get it accomplished for the next morning. Because we always try to state, well, if you don't mind trying to get it done by tomorrow morning, and usually we do it in the one place I teach that we do the class in the morning. So they're done by noon. So I figured they have plenty of time to go home, have lunch, and then just get to it. Well, why do we keep thinking that when you know that is not the case? They'll wait until late evening thinking that they can just shortcut it.
So it sounds like you also have the at least 10% in your group too. Probably more.
On average, it's usually one person that stays well late or early, if you want to say it, before having range time. And then, as it was stated before, that sometimes it reflects on their ability to ride as well as absorb the new ways of riding or riding techniques. So you sort of read the student, listen to what that student stated earlier, and then just try, well, in my case, I just stay calming as much as possible. And at the end of class, if they make it through the first day, let them know. Get some sleep, forget about everything. Don't try and overcompensate by going home and, over reflecting on what happened today. Muscle memory already there, you're tired. You need to get the 8 hours so you can have fun the next morning. And that usually happens. But yeah, as far as the e-course, I have the average of about a student per class that stays up well past midnight. And that would be the following morning that they would have to go on the first day of range.
And it's nice, Lynn, that you have the option of allowing them to take the e-course later. We have a state mandated knowledge test we have to administer, and because of COVID, we're doing it first thing when they arrive. So they really don't have the luxury of being given extra time. But we've only had one student that I've heard of who came in and said, I have to take a knowledge test? I would have paid more attention to the e-course if I had known.
If only, right? I don't know if you guys use Res for your enrollment, but in Res, there's a feature where you can have the entire class get a reminder email, if you will, and it can say whatever you want. And I have, they enroll and they get their confirmation email that goes out to them, but then a couple of days, I think I have it set up for 3 days before their class, they get another email that says, hey, if you haven't done your e-course, remember, you have to have that done, before your class. So hopefully that forestalls some of the midnight e-course stuff.
We don't have Res, but we had a system by which we were sending out the original e-course information 30 days prior to class, then sending them another reminder about a couple weeks before, and then sending them another reminder about a few days before. And, still 10%.
May I ask, is that email function, Lynn, is that automated or something that you're able to automate?
It's automated. You set it up as part of when you create your class, and it just happens. It happens in the background without you even knowing about it. And I use that same feature. For example, if I know the weather's going to be challenging on a particular weekend, I can go in and use that same feature to send a specific email to that entire class.
Well, that's great. I mean, I know our admin does stuff like that, but there are things that slip through the cracks. So yeah, if we can have that more automated, because I think she emails them directly, but who knows if because it sounds like that one goes directly to whatever email address they registered through.
Right. And I've also found that sometimes I get better results if I text students, because it seems to me that especially the younger crowd, they seem to be more text motivated than email motivated. So, if I have one of those important notices, I'll just go into Res and pull up the sheet, and it really doesn't take very long to send, 12 texts if I copy and paste and work through the list pretty quickly.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, Mighty Text works really well with that, Lynn.
What is that, Ron?
It's an app that is integrated with Google. It's called Mighty Text, and it's free, and you can copy and paste very quickly and very easily.
That's good to know too. I use Google Voice, but it still takes a while to get, a dozen numbers into a group text.
How many programs out there, just by a quick show of hand, virtual or real, use res that you're aware of? So New York, Ron, got you? No. Chris, yes. I'm surprised more people don't. I understand, some of the constraints of it, but it seems to me if we had a larger community using RES, certainly from a larger perspective, we could certainly look at all these smaller things in a much larger context, research-wise, and have better ideas about how to approach things, I would think, instead of 100 different.
And I don't know if, I'm sorry, Don. I don't know if you're aware of it, but the e-course Res has just come up with an adaptation for the e-course where they're not going to be using the coupon codes anymore. For those that are familiar with those, they're actually going to provide a specific link to give to the student, and they can go right in and do the e-course, enroll in the e-course that way. I went through the walkthrough of it today, and it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, a lot easier to use than the coupon codes.
When we first started the e-course a couple years ago, we used coupon codes that first year, and it was a lot to manage. We just found there was a different aspect of it to manage using the URL. So with the URL, of course, you're paying up front, which is one difference. But it was just as much work for us to try to keep up with new registrations or transfers and supplying people with links that way. So I don't know that we have a particular preference between the two.
Well, you're going to find, Nicole, that eventually MSF will stop supporting the coupon codes and just go with the URL link. Did you are you using Res for your e-course registrations?
No, the college will probably never let us.
Yeah, that's my problem. That is my problem. So, but
speaking
we'll
of PTSD,
knowing
Ron,
about it. What's PTSD?
dealing with the college. We were talking about PTSD earlier.
I was talking about PTS. I don't believe in the D.
Yeah, they're still working on it. There's a big meeting tomorrow, so maybe I'll know something after that. And who knows? I might even get to call my state administrator and say, hey, college has decided not to run the program this year. I'm going riding.
Just throw a plate on the range bikes. We're good to go.
Lynn, stop shaking your head no. Could happen.
So optimistic, Ron. So optimistic.
Hey, listen, at my age, there's only one thing I'm optimistic about. And he was here just a minute ago.
I heard a great saying today, and I'm trying to remember. And it's wake up and approach the day like it may be your last, and go to bed as if you had the rest of a long life to live. I don't know. I thought it was cool. Got me through another half a mile thinking about it.
I do that, but the boss is always mad that I show up late.
All right, one at a time here.
Oh, what? Who'd I step on?
You stepped on two people, Ron. Jeez.
I'm sorry. If Robin was one of them, it's okay.
All right.
So did you ride or just wash today?
No, I rode a little bit too, because after I washed it, I had to throw some of the internal water out. It was covered in salt from a recent trip, so I had to get it clean.
Okay, Robin, your turn.
And I was just making a joke about the sleep part of that phrase. It's like I keep doing that, but the boss is always mad when I show up in the middle of the afternoon.
It happens. So who got a ride in today? Mark, did you go to the mountain? Don't you hate that? There you go. Bingo.
Sorry. No, I came from mid-state to the coast and did some kayaking with my family, and I was just a couple hours on the bike, but it was a lot nicer than driving on the super slab in the truck.
I was thinking about you today as I was washing my car, and I saw Chuck's post about going up the mountain. And I was thinking, boy, one of these days I should just go south, and maybe we could do a little adventure riding.
That'd be great. Chuck apparently gets the pleasure of test models from the BMW Performance Center. I'm more than a little jealous.
It's a tough job for those that have to do it, I'm sure.
That's like on Cheers when Norm got a job in a brewery. And he hugged one of the vats and he's like, I'm home.
They've I let Mark know there's a brewery that just opened up across the street, like within 200 meters, maybe 300 meters of my house. And it's like I can't drink any other beer now. And it's so attractive and so easy that I have to, limit myself. Remember the endurance thing that we talked about earlier, it's not about getting it all done now. I got to put some of that off.
It's always good to have a brewery within walking distance.
Unfortunately, there's like, I would say a 200-foot downslope between here and there. So going there would be okay. Coming back, I'm not so sure.
The stumbling distance.
Crawling?
There's a brew club close to where I live. It would be like 5 miles round trip, which for us and a walk is totally fine, but we always walk with our dogs and that's a bit much for them. So that's my excuse. Fortunately.
There's a nice train track trail here. We have to drive to it. It's 3 or 4 miles through the big city and not a good walk to it place, but it's centered on 2 large cities and we can go either way, either 5 or 10 miles and then have an ice cream and walk back. Or there's a brewery on each end too. So you have your choice, what you want to work out on the way home. There are some nice things about New York that I'm finding are acceptable. A little bit like Europe.
The Corning Museum makes New York worth it.
Where are you located, Donald?
I'm in Chester.
Okay.
The Motorcyclopedia Museum is worth the trip. It's not as fancy as that one. Geez, I can't remember the name of it.
Harbor.
Yeah, not as fancy as that one, but certainly the motorcycles that are there, I think, are a little bit more historical.
Yeah. Plus, you can say hi to Jack when you're over there.
I have not. amazingly quiet tonight, but that's okay. We need quiet time as well. So I think I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. Once again, thank you for showing up. Some really good discussions tonight. Greatly appreciate it. Trying to think of something to say other than I just love you guys, and don't take that the wrong way, but it's becoming easier to say as I get to know each and every one of you a little bit more. You feed my energies in doing this, and there are days when I really don't. But when I get on here, all those thoughts just go away, and I just enjoy the community that we have together. So thank you very much for that, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Thanks for having us.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night,
everybody.